You're listening to Contesting Wrestling, and hello once again, everybody listening to the sound of my voice. My name, as usual, is Doc Diamondfire. I'm excited to do this. Is an episode that has been floating around Ben's head for quite some time. But before we get to Ben, we got Katie Vella on this episode. Hey, Katie, how you doing?
That is handgun Katie Vella to you. I am good except for the wretched cough I have, but I will mute my microphone as that comes along.
Carrying some new hardware, are you these days?
Hardware? Oh yeah, I mean I quit reffing and started wrestling. If that's what you mean.
Ah, yes. I thought.
Is the handgun hardware?
Yes,
The handgun.
It's not a literal
yes.
handgun. I am the handgun.
Ah,
I'm handgun Vella. Yeah, it's a long
As far as
story.
the authorities are concerned, there's no handgun.
As far as the authorities and the FBI listening to this recording, there is no handgun and there has never been a handgun.
And the referees in your matches, of course.
Yeah. Oh, well, I mean, why would I ever be mean to a ref? Me? No, never.
So anyway, I am Dr. Ben Abelson, professor of philosophy at Mercy College, and longtime devotee of professional wrestling.
Long time butt sniffer, got it.
Something like that. And I am extremely happy to introduce our guest for today. He's a former Port Authority police officer who was part of the post 9/11 World Trade Center Rescue and Recovery Team. He's a graduate of the New York Restaurant School Natural Gourmet, the author of the cookbook Toss Your Own Salad and the accompanying blog, and his forthcoming novel, Graveyard Stompers, about the Brooklyn hardcore scene, is coming out soon from Gutter Books. Eddie McNamara, thank you so much for being on the Contesting Wrestling podcast. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. This is awesome.
So Eddie, we'll get into the matches in a little bit that we watched for this episode, and I have a little story to tell about how you came to be part of the episode. But first, just tell us a little bit about yourself vis-a-vis professional wrestling. How did you become a fan? What era do you think is your favorite? And in general, there's this question that we kind of ask all our guests, which is, you're into, obviously, you're a chef, you're interested in music, you're interested in a lot of things. Why, of all the things one could spend their time with, should someone or would someone want to watch professional wrestling? What do you think?
Well, should I start with background first?
Start with the background, yeah.
Okay, so I grew up in Brooklyn, and I started watching WWF via my mom, actually, in about 1982 or 83. Backlund was the champ, and Pedro Morales was, he was the number 2 guy, basically, and Buddy Rose was like a prominent person on WWE TV back then. Yeah, it was like Buddy Rose and Doug Summers were, the Wild Samoans, and I just thought it was, I loved it from the beginning. And my grandfather, who lived with us as well, was a really mean person, and he hated wrestling, and he said that wrestling is for white people who can't accept the fact that the heavyweight champion in boxing is black. And like
I bet there were a few of those.
My grandfather was a wild dude. I don't think he was I don't think that was spot on at all.
I mean, that was a widespread concern amongst white people in like the 1930s, I think. Like really regressive
I was
stuff.
like a massive Larry Holmes and Mike Tyson fan in the 80s. So yeah, I definitely wasn't watching, to see, Bob Backlund be my childhood hero. Like he was definitely not as exciting as, say, Holmes or Tyson, all-time great boxers.
Or even like Superfly Jimmy Snuka in the WWF at the time.
But I feel like watching back then, I feel like wrestlers weren't featured as much. Like you would see like Kurt Hennig would be there, and then with Eddie Gilbert, and then all of a sudden he's gone for a long time. And like Snuka, I thought was maybe like not an every week guy, like an attraction. Like, you know, when there was going to be like a big show at the Garden, you know, maybe Snuka would show up right before that. But it seemed like there was some, you know, real, you know, there were consistent players, and I don't know if he was, you know, I'm not entirely sure, but I don't know if he was one of those guys.
Gotcha.
At least for the televised, you know, Channel 9 shows back then.
Gotcha. That era is somewhat fascinating to me, just because it's that just pre-Hogan era, right? When WWF, well, by that time they had dropped the first W, right? Was still a regional promotion, right? So a lot of those guys would do the whole circuit, and they would only sometimes come to the WWF. Though, of course, you know, Backlund being the champion was going to be a staple. That's cool. And how did you feel about Backlund? So you're saying that you weren't a huge Backlund fan, but like, did it seem to you that he was kind of a step back almost from like Billy Graham?
Yes, like there was, like, in my mind, I didn't know about his shoot background, that I didn't know about his collegiate wrestling experience, but like in my 7, 8, 9-year-old mind, there was no way Bob Backlund could kick these guys' asses. I couldn't believe that, like, Bob Backlund could beat 300-pound Sergeant Slaughter in a real fight. You know, that guy's a Marine. You know, like how is Bob Backlund, the guy who walks up and down stairs for exercise, gonna beat, you know, like a muscle dude like Superstar Billy Graham, or like, you know, Slaughter, or like the Masked Superstar, like just, you know, this huge dude who does a neck breaker, like he breaks your neck, you know, and like how's like little Bob Backlund gonna do this? And so I really didn't understand the appeal of Backlund until his comeback when he snapped, and then I thought that may be my favorite thing ever in professional wrestling, Mr. Backlund.
We've definitely covered on this podcast Mr. Backlund coming back and snapping, as both Ben and I's formative wrestling years were the mid-90s. He was introduced to us as like this old guy. Of course, looking back, he's 42, you know, wasn't particularly old. But in the youth-soaked, you know, new generation era, he was this pre-Hogan guy coming in to be the vanilla wrestler. Like, I just want one more chance. And when he snapped, his character was so incredible just the whole time. Like, his promos where he would use, well, you know, $1 million words incorrectly, like, fantastic.
I'm gonna procure the chicken wing on you.
It was just beautiful television. It was just such a great character, and like kids were so angry with him, with you know, and just he would have this great banter with like young fans. And I witnessed it in person in a parking lot across the street from Shotgun Saturday Night. Backlund was getting his car, and a bunch of kids followed him down there, and he was like making them, in order to get an autograph, he was making them answer questions that were impossible for a child to answer. So, you know, he was great. He
like
was
naming the presidents in order or something.
That's definitely a tale that goes around about how he would just make kids answer the wildest, like, historical trivia questions to just get an autograph, and it's like that wasn't character work. He's just kind of out of his mind.
Yeah, not to jump way ahead, but you know, in one of the matches we watched today, we watched something from Wrestlemania 11, and I watched some promos in the middle of the show. I don't know if you even watched them. And after one of the relevant promos, the camera goes into the other room, and there's Mr. Bob Backlund playing chess with Jonathan Taylor Thomas, who was 12 years old or 13 years old, and like the hottest kid on television at the time. And he asks him his trivia questions, and Thomas answers them, and Backlund gets pissed, and Thomas checkmates him, and Backlund gets more pissed, and it's just great.
This is 94, correct?
95.
Yeah.
He would have just voiced Simba in young Simba in The Lion King. Yeah, he would have. I think that came out in 94. Honestly, the whole segment would have been better if at the end he put JTT in the chicken wing. Missed opportunity there.
Yeah, I mean that should have been like that. Everyone should have been susceptible to the chicken wing. Like there should have been no, like,
including minors. Yes.
Absolutely. Like those kids in the parking lot should have got chicken winged for an autograph. I mean, I'd be all for it.
Well, when my first wrestling school I went to, training under Johnny Rods, one day I wasn't there the day Bob Backlund showed up.
Oh, that's too
And
bad.
You never told me
showed,
that, I don't think.
I know, right? It was like 2009 or 2010 or something, and Backlund shows up to visit Johnny and to work out. And he must have been around, what was he? If he was 42 years old in 92, he would have been in his late 50s at this point. And as the story went, he got in the ring, kind of trained with each person individually until they blew up. And then it was over. And everyone got their picture taken with Backlund, with him putting them in the chicken wing.
I believe every single word of that he blew everyone up.
Yeah, I've seen some of those pictures. Oh yeah, he blew everyone up. You can't get, his stamina is legendary into his older age. Can't touch
doing
Backlund
those
on
steps, man.
Just right, the Harvard step test.
Harvard step test.
So I wanted to ask you something about something you said, Eddie, about the Masked Superstar and his neck breaker. And you were like, yeah, he'd break their neck. And I mean, I feel like that's something that's kind of lost on the modern generation of wrestling fans and on modern wrestling in general, is the idea that these moves did the damage that they said they were going to do. Right? Like, do you feel that there's been somewhat of a change in that?
I feel like I was traumatized throughout my childhood, where my favorites were constantly getting hurt. Like Ricky Steamboat's larynx was crushed, and then Ricky Steamboat got DDT'd on the concrete, and he had a brain bleed or something like that.
I think he really got knocked out from that.
Yeah,
I think that was a shoot.
But at the time, I don't know either way. I assume it's all kind of a shoot, and I'm just I'm absolutely traumatized for these dudes. Even Hogan, every time he went against a big dude, they would break his ribs. They'd sit on him, and somehow he would have to get taped ribs, and I'd send get well Hulk message to him, And,
when I was a kid, my cousin was convinced that Vader really broke Sting's ribs that time.
I mean, I was an adult at the time. I was probably 16 or 17. And yeah, I think maybe he did. I still kind of believe that.
Was very convincing at his peak, for sure. Dangerous.
I think we all believe that Cactus Jack had his back broken or whatever from the power bomb on the cement. Because how couldn't you? Looking at it now, that's a very gentle power bomb on the cement.
It's in the era, it's so when you're seeing these things sort of for the first time, and it's it really was believable, at least to me, and I was young at the time, but I think that the storytelling in the business really wanted the fans to believe that this was the hardest physical encounter, and this happened, and you're not going to see this person on television for X amount of time, and they're legitimately hurt, and they really did a great job of selling that concept, because I think all throughout the 80s and into the 90s, I think there was sort of like a spiked pile driver. Remember the controversy about a spiked pile driver, or the Hart punch,
right.
You can't, Ox Baker killed I don't know, 3 people with the Hart punch. You can't do that. It'll in 92, when shortly after started watching, they did the angle where Yokozuna did the bonsai drop to Hacksaw Jim Duggan several times, and Duggan was off TV for a couple of months, and they showed bruised torso, and Duggan being on the phone I'll be back, don't worry about me, But they sold it like that. And of course you believe it. This huge guy is going to sit on you.
I still have a hard time believing how some of those jobbers didn't die when he would go full on ankles out, heels out.
You mean the one where the difference between the Yoko working against a guy he respected and Yoko working against a guy he didn't give a shit about?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Seriously. All right, if he lands on his feet first and he can kind of control it, that's fine. But sometimes it's just splat.
Sometimes he just can't be fucked that day.
Yeah, that looks scary. I mean, that was we needed a hero like Lex Luger to really to sort that whole situation out, because a lot of guys were getting sat on, and and it was taking them out.
Luger looked like if you sat on him,
Oh
he'd
yeah,
be
totally.
okay.
He had America, and and he could totally prevail.
And the pecs that he could jiggle.
Yeah.
Oh yeah,
They were
that's
strong.
right.
It was
WBF.
nobody ever kicked out of the bonsai drop, but one time he did the bonsai drop to the Undertaker and then got up to give him another one, and the Undertaker sat up. As at Survivor Series 93, and Yoko looks terrified at the
94.
Undertaker, and it sets up their match at the
I
Royal
see.
Rumble.
Yes,
Very
yes,
well
93.
done. Very well done. Royal Rumble
right.
94, yeah, Survivor Series 93. A very entertaining show.
So Eddie, and I guess maybe this feeds into what you were, or is relevant to what you were just saying. So the other question I was asking. So you were a big boxing fan at the time.
Yes.
I guess you were a fan of other sports, maybe.
I was a baseball fan, a New York Mets fan.
Got you. So given that you were a sports fan, and like particularly you were a fan of real fights of boxing, what is it about wrestling that you found compelling and maybe still find compelling?
Well, I think first and foremost the trash talk, the sort of the setting up of why I am invested in this fight is, that's something that it has always been great. It's great now, and even in even in '82, it was 82, 83, where like Sergeant Slaughter had whipped Backlund with his riding crop, and like the drama was that Bob Backlund has to now redeem himself, his whipped self, and can he do it? And I think that's a lot more interesting than like say Mike Tyson is fighting a guy he's 100% going to beat, like basically a jobber of boxing, and I think the storytelling, but especially the trash talk, and I think there's a real element of comedy to it that it doesn't just take itself seriously. It aims to entertain, whereas like a baseball game can be super boring for 12 innings, or a boxing match can be just two heavyweights like gassed out holding onto each other. But if you go to MSG, go to a WWF card at the time, it's going to be great. Or if you watch like the Clash of the Champions on TBS, it's going to be awesome. It's going to deliver. And like there's no real sports version, if anything, is compelling as like Flair Funk 89.
Listen, baseball delivers. You just have to be patient.
I mean, in my lifetime, the Mets have, they've won one World Series, and it was due to a mishap from another team. So someone had to make a mistake, and since then, that was 34 years ago. No, it's
86.
36. So it's 36 years ago, and it's been 36 years, and I've had no joy.
I'm a Brewers fan, so my life is pain.
Yeah, it's I mean, baseball. Yeah, sure, baseball delivers in spurts, but I don't think you get like if you go to a 3-hour baseball game, or you go to a 3-hour wrestling event, you're going to have a lot more reasons to be engaged in the wrestling event.
No, part of the good thing about baseball for me is that I can look away sometimes, whereas wrestling you really can't. You'll miss something.
I definitely think so, and I think baseball, I'm afraid to look away because I'm afraid I'm going to get hit with a ball. They come whizzing by, and it's like a real
thunk.
I thought it was funny the first AEW show at Arthur Ashe, and I don't know if this was true for the next one. They really miscalculated like how many concession stands they needed, and like how long it would take people to get in and out of the building, because it's built for tennis where like you pay attention a little bit, and like some of the games like aren't as important as or some of the matches aren't as important as others, and like people kind of come and go. Whereas with wrestling, especially AEW, everyone watches everything.
The second one wasn't nearly as bad. They were both better prepared, and the product isn't quite as hot.
Got you. Yeah, with that first one, it's like everyone was going to go to the concession stand at the exact same times, which was like when there was a pause in the action.
It never actually let up, though, like at any point.
Yeah, that was a great show.
That first Grand Slam was really a ridiculous show.
I was also going to say, I always find it fascinating how much of a wrestling fan Muhammad Ali was. And he did that whole thing where he let Gorilla Monsoon like airplane spin him. Like he put him over, and that speaks to the fact that and you see it all the time where professional athletes, sports stars, they love the pageantry of wrestling, right? They wish that their victories could like have that kind of narrative significance the way that winning a world title in wrestling does.
Their leagues have rules against them celebrating too visibly, depending on what exactly it is that you're doing. Like, you'll see baseball players will have their little handshakes with the whole team, but like football players they might spike the ball and dance a little, but the celebrations were getting kind of elaborate, and the leagues were like, no, it's unsportsmanlike. I'm like, no, it's fun, man. It's fun.
And who doesn't want a belt?
That's the
like
fun.
I think every like world champion athlete now has a belt made or given to them.
Yeah.
I think every human being, really, just the secret desire is to have a world championship belt over your shoulder.
I kind of wanted to get one for completing my PhD, but it didn't happen.
You know what? It's never too late. It's never too late. Like
now that I got tenure, right? But so getting to the specific subject matter for this episode. So Eddie, we met in Vegas over the summer at the Psycho Las Vegas Festival, which is an awesome collection of metal and metal adjacent music. And my girlfriend Sandra and I, our plane was delayed, our plane was canceled. And so thankfully we got to hang out with you and your wife Marav a little bit more in Vegas. And you asked us to come to this incredible restaurant, this psychedelic Italian place called Super Frico. And that it was probably the like coolest dining experience I've ever had in my life. It was like, there were like circus performers, and like just the guy who served us mozzarella had like a whole act involved in preparing the mozzarella. That was amazing. So we show up, and Mayrav is like, oh, why don't you guys sit together so you can talk wrestling? And I hadn't been prepared for this, but it turned out I sit down and Eddie's like, hey, so how about that Bret Hart versus British Bulldog from SummerSlam 92? Wasn't that an incredible match? And I'm like,
clearly what you bring up to a wrestling fan for the first time is Bret Hart versus British Bulldog from right when you started watching wrestling.
Right, exactly. I'm like, well, yeah, hell yeah. And so, we launched right into it, and it so happened that I had been keeping that match in my back pocket for an episode where we would talk about instances where there was a match where one wrestler really carried the other one, where it was really a, and to with success or maybe not so much.
And oh boy, did he.
Indeed. So, Eddie, so this first match we're talking about today is, again, Bret Hart defending the Intercontinental Championship against the British Bulldog from SummerSlam 1992, 80,000 people in Wembley Stadium, a match that many people regard as one of the greatest matches of all time. So what are your reflections on this match, Eddie?
Okay, so my first impression was watching it, on television when it happened. I was absolutely blown away by the near falls and the way it ended, and just the fact that the crowd was so into it. It was I think that was like the hottest crowd I've ever sustained reaction I think I've ever heard, and it just seemed like such a big event. It seemed the Intercontinental title, Bret Hart, Bulldog. None of these things seemed like they would be that big, but all together in Wembley Stadium, and then they put on this match that's like this memorably, incredible match. Like I want to rewind a tape and watch it again. Like it was so good. It was, I just remember that being like, people always sort of like say, Steamboat Savage. You list like the 10 matches that everybody says, and this and the Bret Piper match were like the first two that come to my mind as so for this, which it was really exciting, I got to rewatch it, and and I feel just as sort of amped about it as I did watching it live, and because I didn't know in 92 sort of the backstory that Bulldog is partying with Neidhart for a week, and he sort of he forgets the script, within the first 2 minutes of the match, and then he's winded in the third minute. So I didn't watching this, as a teenager. I don't know this. I'm 16 years old. I'm watching it. It's just like, this is blowing me away. This incredible match. I don't know that one guy is doing all the lifting after 2 minutes. So it's, watching it with that in mind, it's maybe even more impressive that they were able to get such an incredibly good match, and the carrying is, Bret sort of does. It doesn't make it look like he's carrying him. Like if you didn't know to look for it, you would just think that Bret is sort of, he's in hostile territory. He's wrestling as
as a heel almost, like,
yeah,
as like the more aggressive of the baby faces.
Yeah, he really is, and he's on offense the whole time. He's like sort of like being heelish with the crowd. He's like interacting that the crowd's anti-Bret, and that must have been hard for him. He doesn't. I don't think he necessarily loves that, but he did such an incredible job, and it could have gone wrong so many times, and it was almost like note perfect. And it's not a long match, right? It's maybe 20 minutes,
something like that. Yeah,
something like that. And it just
20
It was long enough,
And it's after the first after sort of the first few sequences, when like Bret takes over and starts like when he starts talking in his ear and calling the spots, it becomes this like great match. It goes from like, okay, it was just like a standard sort of early 90s match to like this classic that we're talking about 100 years later,
visibly calling the match into his ear.
Yeah,
so,
very visibly.
Yeah, so there's all the times where he's just like talking into the back of Bulldog's head, or like you can, if you're looking for it, you can tell he's doing it. I think the only time you actually see him say something is when he calls for the slingshot. It's like duck and then hit me with a slingshot, or he's just like slingshot and then Bulldog does it. Oh no, sorry, backslide. It was the backslide. He says backslide. He ducks, and then he does the backslide.
I didn't catch that. I did catch the myriad of times he's clearly just, like, covering Bulldog's mouth so you can't see Bulldog talk.
He said in interviews much later that this is one of the few matches that you can see him talking, because Bret always prided himself in not allowing the camera to see him talking. But in that match, it was a necessity because Bulldog had to be spoon-fed everything.
It's crazy because I've watched this match a lot of times over the years. And the first time I watched it was probably about a year or two after it happened. I rented it on video because I started watching wrestling regularly, like pretty much right when Bret Hart won the world title, which was a couple months after this, maybe like a month after this or something.
It was pretty shortly after this. They needed to get the belt off of Flair, and this match really made Bret in their eyes show that, oh, you could carry anybody in the main event. Okay, maybe you can have the world title. We need a guy like that, especially if we're about to go with a young roster. We need a guy who can have good matches with all these kids.
Yeah, and so that first time I watched it, I had the same impression you did, Eddie, that like, oh, this was just one of the greatest matches ever. This is an incredible match. And then years later, Doc and I saw the Bret shoot interview. Yes, Doc is showing off his Bret t-shirt that he's wearing right now. So we watched the Bret shoot interview where Bret talked about the fact that Davey forgot everything and was blown up and that he needed to carry him through the match. And I watched it back then and couldn't really tell. Now, finally, watching it, I'm like, okay, I can kind of see where the lights go out in Bulldog's head. But you're right, Eddie, that Bret just did such a masterful job not only at getting them through the match, but at making Bulldog look, as he needed to in the match, look like the more powerful, more athletic, better guy. And that's just an incredible credit to Bret's abilities there.
Like, he's wild for doing a superplex with a guy that maybe wasn't all there or in any kind of shape to do it. And and Bulldog even like, and you're right, he does make him look really strong. But then like today, as I was watching it before this, I was like, well, Bulldog's not doing his power moves, and he's doing them, and they look really like a mess as he's doing them.
Yeah, there's the one time he presses him up and doesn't quite get him over to the ropes enough, so he like crotches on the middle rope.
That can be very dangerous.
And then like Bret, after all of that, decides like, we're gonna go up and do a superplex with this guy, who's when he also Bulldog goes careening out of the ring, right, and like doesn't like break his fall really well. Like it looks, like.
And right after that, Bret goes for the tope, and Bulldog just doesn't respond at all. So Bret has to kind of like impromptu clothesline him, like kind of invented a new flying move.
But he does it
right on the spot.
He does it. He does it as well as anybody. Like you catch your flyers, but Bulldog didn't even look up. He was too busy, as I think Katie put it, he was too busy clutching the ring and panting because he just couldn't. He couldn't.
Oh yeah,
breathe
at one point he's literally just like.
shape.
Are we talking about the tope? Because he's literally leaning against the side of the ring, like huffing and puffing, instead of trying to catch Bret at all.
Yeah.
Do you think it was nerves?
So apparently, and Doc and Katie, you can attest to this. If you forget what's happening in the ring, or you find yourself overwhelmed mentally, that can blow you up, right? Like.
Yeah. Well, the physical aspect of breathing is something that you have to like discipline yourself to do when you're doing any kind of wrestling or really any kind of heavy physical exercise. It doesn't matter how good shape you're in if you're breathing improperly. The same way executing any other physical thing improperly.
So if you panic
but I don't think Bulldog was in good cardiovascular shape though. I think he spent all week drinking and doing drugs.
Right.
And that's a problem.
And then it's like sort of the biggest spotlight on him in his career to that point as a solo performer.
Yeah.
And he's clearly not in condition to do it well. Like, he's not going to be doing, he does one, I think he does one running power slam.
Yeah. And Bret kicks out.
Yeah. And then,
Bret, he's the only guy to kick out of it.
Like, I just feel like it, he probably had in his mind, he probably had different ideas about how this thing would go. And but he's lucky that Bret was there to save him because
Bret does a fucking German suplex, which I don't know if there is an instance of a German suplex in the WWF before that. I imagine there has to be one somewhere, but I can't think of it off the top of my head.
I think Backlund may have done it.
Yeah, I'm thinking if you go far enough back, it would actually be more common in like, the 70s and the 80s. Not quite like they do it, in modern times. But yeah, I think Backlund did it as a wrestling move, because it is an amateur move, the German suplex. It's a way to put someone's shoulders on the mat. It's not the pile driver some people make it. But
Mr. Perfect used it. Kurt Hennig, maybe before Mr. Perfect, he also, I think, used it.
Oh, in some of those sporadic appearances.
Yeah. When he was in like a weird tag team and whatever he was doing.
Got you. So, so maybe, okay. So maybe under Vince Jr., the first one or something. So the match ends. I love the finish too. Bret puts on the sharpshooter from the mat, and then Bulldog gets to the ropes, and then they do a running spot, and Bret goes for the sunset flip, and Bulldog just kneels down and folds him over into the pin. It's just like, I love the drama of like the last gasp of folding his legs over to get that 1, 2, 3.
And then the crowd reaction is just incredible. It just explodes when that happens.
Great crowd, except for those goddamn air horns.
Oh, the crowd
in every UK show.
The crowd absolutely isn't that a soccer thing?
I guess so.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is. I don't know. Did you watch the promos?
Oh yeah, I mean, I remember the promos almost as well as I remember the match.
Yeah, like Davey Boy is kind of out of it He doesn't really say anything. He speaks slowly. He doesn't sound bad per se. But again, if you know what to look for, he's just
he
like,
speaks
yep,
very slowly and
Bret
carefully.
and Stadium. And meanwhile, Bret has his good promos and his bad promos, and this is a killer Bret
Davey
promo.
Boy has a hangover, folks, so he won't be saying anything or doing anything.
And then there's Diana's promo.
Right. Oh, and then they give like 2.5 minutes. I don't know. It felt like 20 minutes to Diana, who is not a wrestler or a promo person.
She's
at
concerned.
All. And
she's very concerned.
Yeah, they had to take the mic away from her mid-sentence a couple times because she was talking so long without saying anything, and they had to move it
I
forward.
will give her credit for one thing, though. After the match is over and she gets in the ring and they're all like, Bret doesn't shake hands at first and then he does and they hug.
Yeah.
She makes sure, because Bret isn't really like all there, I think, by that point. He raises her hand and Bulldog's hand and she's like, no, I have to be in the middle. And then she raises both of their hands.
Right, you have to be in the middle.
Which is an important detail, I think,
right.
for the story they're telling.
It is. As long as we're gonna mention all these auxiliary things, in the middle of all this is the bagpipe performance where they bring out Roddy Piper.
Yeah.
Right before the match.
And speaking of boxers, Lennox Lewis.
I love how the Pipers.
Boy Smith, yeah.
Yeah, Lennox Lewis. The Pipers start playing, and Bobby Heenan says, "I hate hard rock."
Heenan was the best.
Just the genius of Bobby Heenan, you know.
Some other details there of like how Bret made himself the heel for the match, or at least the relative heel, just by being a little more aggressive. He's the first one to throw a strike, elbowing Bulldog. Bulldog doesn't throw any strikes the entire match. Bret never punches Bulldog because that would be too heelish. He does European uppercuts. Like all that stuff is great.
Right.
You know, at the beginning,
legal strikes.
At the beginning, Bret just presses his hands up against Bulldog's chest, like back off a little bit, and then Bulldog shoves him, and Bret goes back. And I don't know, it's really really good nuanced character work there, telling that story of Bulldog. Bulldog says, "Oh, he's hoping that this doesn't destroy the family." And in his promo, Bret's like, "Yeah, well, then you shouldn't have challenged me for the title.
Well, you should have laid off the sauce."
Right.
Yeah, right. But this is the opposite of fucking Hulk Hogan, right? Who, Andre the Giant challenged him for the title, right? But Hogan stayed the babyface somehow. Right, he made Andre the heel for challenging.
Right,
he made himself a victim.
Yeah, exactly.
Hogan. Yeah, he cast himself as a victim. Back to the Bret and Davey Boy thing. I think Bret won every shoulder block.
Oh yeah,
everyone. I'm not sure if it's everyone, but the vast majority, Bret knocked him over with, and I was that's something you wouldn't expect at the time.
I think there was one big one from Bulldog, the one that knocked Bret all the way out of the ring.
Okay, all right, that makes sense.
Yeah, so it's like Bret's,
because usually Bulldog's the power
so Bret's,
guy.
He got more of them, but when Bulldog actually got a chance to do it, and which is that's the right dynamic there, right? The heel kind of gets more of the advantage, but when the babyface gets a chance, they knock it out of the park.
Goes big.
Yeah. All right, cool. Anything else on this? I mean, there are a ton of cool spots and stuff, but
Bret said in that shoot interview that you mentioned that this was really the match that made him. And a lot of fans don't realize, oh, well, you lost, and it's like, it doesn't matter. That wasn't the point. Vince, doing commentary, could see what was going on. He knew that this was a huge event that they built on the back of Davey Boy Smith in England. He knew what condition Davey Boy was in, and he knew that Bret was there to save the day. And when Bret saved the day, that was, that impressed Vince. And the next several years were affected heavily by this match.
Bulldog never got that spot again.
And yeah, that's No, any other time Bulldog ever got a title match, it was never on a big show. Like they fed him to Diesel, they fed him to
They
Shawn
fed him to
Michaels,
Bret
but that
again.
was it. They fed him to Diesel, they fed him to Shawn Michaels, right? They fed him to Bret. They weren't about to like feature the
And
British Bulldog as a
a few months
major
after
player.
this, he got fired because him and the Warrior both left because they were trying to clear out all the steroid freaks.
Well, specifically, they were on a human growth hormone, which was still experimental at the time, you know, and they were like, no, you can't get around our tests by doing this other thing. Sorry.
All right.
Yeah, let's move on to other matches. This was a match between two guys who were family. They liked each other very much. Even if Bret's critical of Bulldog, he always speaks with him with great affection. I don't think that's the case with most of these other matches.
The next match, which, you know, still like also a great effort at one performer to try to make a great match, but with much less success. Big Poppa Pump Scott Steiner in his first big WWE match or I guess it was WWE already. After WCW got bought out. Oh no, they ran it back at the next pay-per-view. But it wasn't any better than
the next pay-per-view. That's
right. Katie, could you say what you... Yeah, I was going to say, could you say what you said again? I don't think it quite came through.
Oh, me? I said first and last big match.
Yeah.
Oh, right. And then Ben said, there was one more the next month. He's not on the WrestleMania card a few months after this. That's how quickly he fell down the ladder after this match.
So it's Steiner challenging Triple H for the World Heavyweight title at Royal Rumble 2003. And, you know, Steiner was one of the WCW contracts that they didn't get right out of the gate when they bought WCW. He came in later. Doc and I were both at Survivor Series 2002, where he debuted to a big pop and cut a promo. And then
he beat up Matt Hardy and Shannon Moore, I think.
And then, you know...
No, Matt Hardy and it was somebody else. Okay, it doesn't matter. I'm sorry.
Yeah, definitely Matt Hardy. Yeah. In any case, they put him right in the main event against Triple H. And they did, you know, they had like a cool little program where, you know, Steiner showed him up in arm wrestling and push-ups, etc. And so I think people were excited for this match. At the time, I was mostly just watching SmackDown. So, like, I wasn't quite as aware of what was going on here. I ended up watching it later. But
for context, this was in the heart of Raw being the Triple H show. Starring Triple H.
Right, he had been given the world title when they split the brands.
Yeah.
He lost it to Shawn Michaels for a little while. He won it back. And I think this was his real, like, first big test. Like, can he, you know, make a big money marquee match with Scott Steiner, with this, you know, valuable asset that they had just acquired? Well...
it does not show in this match, but one of the best wrestlers of the previous 10 years who had gotten over in everything that he had done. He had had great matches with everybody in a legendary tag team. He was super hot in WCW. There was no reason to think that Scott Steiner was going to be as bad as he was.
But was he actually good at the end of WCW? Like, were his matches good?
He knew... not necessarily, but he knew how to get a lot of heat.
He was fun.
Yeah. Right, he was fun.
I mean, like...
That's a good way of putting
it. The Scott Steiner, Frankensteiner version was, you know, that was very 90s. This is, you know...
Yeah, one of the greatest moves ever.
Like, I mean, just like, if you look at his matches from the 90s, just his athleticism and his strength and his technique is just... The guy is brilliant, and you know, like Doc said, like one of the best wrestlers of like the decade he was performing in. And then by the end of WCW, when he's doing this big Poppa Pump gimmick, and he's, you know, 70 pounds heavier or something like that, you know, he's main eventing 2001 WCW shows, but it's you know, he's doing just like a, you know, like a gorilla press, and he's doing like a, you know, a Steiner recliner, and like he's just like, he has like 3 power moves, and
the many belly to belly suplexes that he showcases in this match. And actually, this is going to speak to when we talk about the Booker Buff Bagwell match a little bit later. We can talk a little bit more about like what the WCW style was and how different it was from WWE by then. But just in this match, yeah, it's he hadn't been challenged in this way in a long time, I guess, right?
No.
His
No, not
muscles
at all.
were so pointy.
He was having
How
matches.
are they so pointy? I've never seen that on another human being
the
before.
I
peaks,
referred to
right?
them as tumorous.
There you go.
That was the peaks for the freaks, right? I believe.
Yes.
That's
the
right.
peaks.
His peaks for his freaks.
So
Holler
the
if you hear him.
match starts out okay. His shine is like pretty good. Like Triple H is bumping for him. He's doing his belly to bellies, and that's fine. But then sometime between like Triple H's heat beating him up and the comeback, he really seems to run out of gas and just run out of stuff to do. I think is part of it, right? Once he gets to like the 5th or 6th belly to belly suplex, the crowd is not happy at all. But
you hear scattered Triple H chants because people realize, oh no, Steiner's washed. We can't, this is our guy too, Triple H, and because Triple H is doing fine. He's trying his damn best to have a match with Scott Steiner.
I mean, Triple H is doing everything in his power. He's like selling like the Wolf of Wall Street. He really is. He's like going out there and doing like 100% Ric Flair impersonation. He's basically trying to do the best possible Flair, and Steiner just and Flair's egging him on like it's and Steiner like you said, he had a few Triple H throws these great looking punches early in the match, and Steiner has some weird slappy chops, and already like for me I thought like, oh no, this is oh no, this is going to be a mess. And then I think it's like a couple of suplexes and now it's already now it's already gone, and it's sort of like the Ric Flair wrestling a broomstick, except for this broomstick is like really super roided out
and might hurt him with one of those suplexes.
Yeah, and it's just like tossing him. I think he does like 54 belly to belly suplexes in this match. It's
give or take, yeah.
And
it's just atrocious, and
with no fire and no like acknowledgement of the audience. Like he's the baby face, right? And he's got no there's no charisma coming off of him whatsoever. And then he like straight up botches the butterfly suplex. He like falls over.
Yeah.
He doesn't seem to have any balance. It gets harder and harder to watch. It's funny though, both this and I have some things to say in this regard about the Booker and Bagwell match. Some of the things he does, like doing the belly to bellies over and over again, it's funny because move wise, it could be a Brock Lesnar match, right? Move wise, Brock Lesnar doesn't do any more moves than that. But of course, it's like the way he throws his Germans, but it's also the difference in the style, because in this period, people expected a lot more from like work, as they call it, work rate wise, from what they expect even nowadays from WWE. This was at the time when RVD and Benoit and Guerrero and Jericho were all doing their thing, and Triple H could keep up with them. But then, it's funny because for the fans at the time, Triple H could only keep up with those guys. Yes. But here he is like far outshining Scott Steiner and trying his best to like drag Steiner up with him.
I mean, this you're absolutely right. Like this was a major pay-per-view main event. So like, or the main, title match. So there's a standard that like you're expecting that this is going to be, to a certain standard, and it's nowhere near that, and it's through no fault of Triple H's, and I'm not a Triple H guy, and I really wasn't in 2003. I was not, at all a Triple H guy, and it's like the rare performers where Triple H makes the other guy look strong at his expense, because I think there's nothing else to do, because Steiner's out there like he's wrestling like one of these like 80s strong men like Ted Arcidi,
Right.
and he just has like the 2 moves, and it's like and there's such a like we really expect such a great thing out of it, and it's like this like 80s match between like I don't know, just one of those like MSG matches in the 80s where like Don Morocco would be lazy that day, and he'd be up against somebody who would have to do all the selling, and really if you think about Triple H just absolutely takes a one-sided beating, an unconvincing one-sided beating. Triple H is bleeding, he's being put through all sorts of like sort of devastating moves, but never a near fall for some reason, and he's
Yeah, that's another weird thing about that. Like Steiner is not trying to win the match.
At one point, Triple H has to talk Steiner out of hitting him with a chair. Because that's like, in WCW, it didn't matter.
right.
Like, you're outside the ring, you can hit someone with a chair. Like, no one's going to disqualify you. Triple H is like, no, don't do that.
Man, Triple H probably at this point in 2003 may have been, correct me if I'm wrong or forgetting someone, the most hated man in wrestling. They were booing Steiner by the end of this match.
I mean,
or just booing in general.
It looks like he doesn't want to be there. It looks like he's just like, all right, I'm gonna.
Neither of them really look like they want to be there, but Triple H is at least trying.
Triple H is trying to look cool in front of Flair. I think he's trying to like be like, look, Rick, I can do what you did, to an extent.
I'm bleeding.
Look, I have blonde hair and blood too, and he's. And then the ending is it's such a whack ending.
Yeah, it's all built to like keep Steiner over, right? Without him really winning. But none of that works. So
no, the coolest spot in the match is Hebner going to ring the bell and then stopping and being like, I'm not just going to disqualify you, Triple H. You got to wrestle. And then eventually he forces Hebner's hand.
Funny thing,
by breaking out the old sledgehammer.
With the sledgehammer. The funny thing about that spot is, Triple H bumps Hebner blatantly, right? Trying to get DQ'd. But for the first time ever in the history of refs getting hit, Hebner gets right up and goes to ring the bell. But yeah.
That's great. Yeah, he tries to get counted out too, and he can't get counted out.
Hebner is the most powerful of refs as far as getting hit, and always has been.
Fair enough. And then Hebner, Triple H hits him with the sledgehammer, and then he's going to take his head off with it, take Steiner's head off with it, and Hebner stops him, and then Steiner very unconvincingly takes the sledgehammer away from Triple H. He couldn't even grab the sledgehammer.
Yeah.
Oh man. And then Steiner goes to put on the Steiner recliner, which Eddie, as you mentioned, was, his go-to because it was such a fucking easy move to do. And doesn't even really bother to hook Triple H's legs. And Triple H half puts himself in the Steiner recliner.
And that's where it's like, it's over for Big Poppa Pump at that point. Like you can't convince them that, you can't sell that guy as a top tier talent.
They throw it to the SmackDown announcers, and it's Taz and Michael Cole. And Cole's like, "Is there going to be a rematch? Who you got?" And Taz is like, "Yeah, my money's on Triple H if there's a rematch." And then the next match on this card was the legendary Angle Benoit Royal Rumble WWE title match.
Right.
So.
Where Benoit loses and then gets a standing ovation from the crowd, like, can we go with this guy instead? Which, I mean, say what you will about Scott Steiner, he's murdered several fewer people that we know of than Chris Benoit. Yeah.
Well, he did run over some cops, right?
Probably.
Steiner? They lived, I think. Yeah.
They lived. That's a big line in my head, is whether or not they lived.
The concept of mathematics.
Fair enough. So, a somewhat similar match, context a little bit different, but fairly close temporally, and with also involving former WCW guys, was a match that Eddie that you suggested, and this is the only match we're covering for today that I had never seen before. It's Buff Bagwell versus Booker T for the WCW World Championship on the July 2nd, 2001 episode of Raw. And I wasn't really watching at this point. This is, shortly after WWE bought WCW. And I guess the idea here was this was like a WCW showcase, right? They're like, here are two of the best guys we got from WCW. We're going to brand Raw WCW just for this main event. And they're going to have the first ever WCW World title match in WWE on Monday Night Raw. And
they got Scott Hudson and Arn Anderson doing the commentary.
Stacy Keibler ring announcing.
They got Nick Patrick. Yeah, Stacy Keibler ring announcing, and they got Nick Patrick reffing. WCW is back, baby, and they're in.
At this
they're
point,
in
Stacy
Tacoma,
Keibler
Washington.
had recently taken Sonny's position of, well, we don't have anything to do with her, but she's too hot to keep off TV.
Right. Yeah. And they were in Tacoma, Washington, a town that WCW never ran.
Yeah, the crowd didn't want to give this a chance to begin with.
I mean, as much as the crowd was, sort of crucial to the Bulldog Bret Hart match, the crowd ruins this match. The crowd really was the weak link in this. I mean, like you guys were saying, that like WWE, by all appearances, is giving WCW a sink or swim opportunity to main event Raw. They completely brand this match as a WCW main event. So it's a Nitro title match as the main event of Raw, which is like mind-blowingly awesome for the time.
I mean, I also don't want to give Buff Bagwell a chance, so.
This is what I wanted to say about the WCW style at the time. Like, I wasn't watching WCW at the end, but if this is an indication of what the main events were like, damn, because it's tough, because at this time, right, you still had Austin and The Rock and Kurt Angle and Triple H and Jericho and all those guys, having just balls out crazy matches. And actually I wasn't a huge fan of the Attitude Era main event style either, really, because it wasn't a lot of wrestling. But there was, the crowd expected a certain kind of excitement from the matches. And it's funny because if you think about this match in relation to contemporary WWE, at the time in 2001, they'd pretty much gotten rid of rest holds, right? Like, there weren't any chin locks in WWF matches. Nowadays, I mean, this match, from a technical standpoint, it's not terrible. Like, if you had Austin Theory and Drew McIntyre do this match on Raw one week, it would be perfectly acceptable.
Right, an hour and a half into Raw.
It wouldn't set the world on fire, but the crowd would probably be fine with it. It's so much about the context and the expectations of that particular audience,
Yeah. I will say that Bagwell strikes, none of them landed by a mile, and that's a big problem.
Not a single one of them made contact, and he was also pre-bumping on everything. Nothing was making contact. It's like he had a force field around him.
Right.
Well, that's how he kept his heat, right, in WCW.
I mean, I think part of it definitely is that. I think part of it is if you look at late stage WCW main events, you're getting things like Scott Steiner versus Jeff Jarrett, Kevin Nash versus Buff Bagwell. Those are the main events of Nitro before they went off the air. So it's kind of trash main events. And this Booker in the main event would have been a step up compared to what they were getting. And Bagwell was never, I guess, in the American males, he was somewhat of a okay worker, but he's a comedy heel. He's gonna say he's gonna flex. He's gonna say he's buff and he's the stuff, and the crowd's gonna hate it. And I think that's
right. He does the antics I'm gonna act injured, and then I'm not injured, and we're heels, ha ha ha. Not like the main event match.
Right. And this to me, and I think saying that the WCW style and the WWE style at the time were different is absolutely absolutely. Like this would not be a main. I mean, of course, this would not be a main event quality match, but this is like a, this could be like a mid card Val Venus versus Test match or something like that. Like it's no worse than those things that were happening. But I think no matter what happened, it could have been like Ultimo Dragon and Rey Mysterio, and that crowd would have not liked it because it was being presented, with Nick Patrick, WCW branded, and it just, like I think it was just like,
I don't know about Ray versus Ultimo Dragon at the time. Like at least some contingent of the crowd was going to be into that.
They'd have made more of an effort to get the crowd into it.
But I mean, you're right. It's almost like the way the ECW reacted to Rey Mysterio at the second One Night Stand. It's like, yeah, you're awesome, you're Rey Mysterio, but you are WWE Rey Mysterio. We don't want to see a 619, that kind of thing.
Because this I think it was the first chin lock, right? Buff Bagwell does a chin lock, and then he does like he grabs he grabs his arms, and then this match sucks chant starts already. Like it's no time into this. Like he's not even, he hasn't really.
He did do a double arm DDT like really early on in the match, which was kind of weird and out of place. Like there was nothing, like if he had whipped that out later, maybe with like a little bit of drama behind it, the crowd still probably wouldn't have popped to it, but it might have helped a little bit.
We've talked a lot about Bagwell. Like Booker was doing fine. I mean, Booker at the time was a world-class athlete. All his stuff always looked good. He had, the spinneroonie. He could cut a promo. Unfortunately, he was stuck in the middle of all of this, and it would be a little while before he could really take his place amongst the top guys in the WWE.
He tries his damnedest to fire up on that comeback, too.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Well, once again, as much as Vince kiboshed the whole WCW thing, he was watching and he liked what he saw with Booker. Not so much with Marcus Alexander Bagwell there. The other big problem with this match that I think had something to do with WCW getting buried is that there's no finish. Steve Austin and Kurt Angle just come in and start beating the shit out of Booker T. And they brawl all the way to the back, and Bagwell's also beating up Booker T, but Austin and Angle don't even acknowledge him until
it ends
he's completely invisible.
That is a true WCW ending. They were sticking true to the product. No finish. Fuck this match.
Yeah.
I mean, I felt like the crowd kind of popped a little bit for the scissor kick and the spinneroonie. Yes. For a second, but I'm not sure because Angle and Austin came out so quickly after that they might have already seen them coming out.
Yeah, I think this was just missing a limo sitting outside, and it would have been the perfect WCW trash main event. I think that was the needed. Like, who's in the limo?
Right. It is hilarious how they beat up Booker,
and then we never find out.
They're not acknowledging that Bagwell's helping, and then once Booker is dumped outside, Bagwell tries to high five them, like, yeah, good job, guys, and then they beat his ass and dump him outside.
Yeah, then they beat the shit out of Buff Bagwell and throw him out of the building too. And you wonder why WCW didn't get over.
Yeah, oh man,
but
it was all that Triple H's
fault. But I
mean,
it's if you think of it, they bought 2001 WCW and not 1996 WCW. Like what could have been, like who would have been good, like DDP in this main event, DDP Booker, like
that was I think they tried that the next week or something.
Yeah, I think DDP was
like a little bit better.
It was a tag match, right? They did a tag.
Yeah, I read up on Booker's comments, like looking back on all this stuff, and he's like, yeah, we tried again with DDP a little later, but that didn't really help too much. The crowd might have just reacted this way to everything. I will say the saddest moment in the match is the crowd's already booing profusely. And then they kind of botch the drop kick coming off the ropes. Like Booker doesn't make contact. And then there's like a whole different like tone. Like it just like drops an octave, the booing. Yeah. Sorry, Doc, what were you saying?
That's a good question. I think it just slipped away. That's okay. If it was good, I would have remembered
it. All right. Yeah. So, unfortunate for both these guys, but I guess especially Booker, because I think like Scott Steiner, Bagwell was, looking for a payday and wasn't really trying to step up his game to hang with the top WWF guys.
They cut Bagwell fast. Like he didn't even make it a year in WWE, correct?
I think he had 3 matches.
He barely made it.
He had a couple bad matches.
Yeah.
He got into a pretty infamous backstage fight with the Hurricane, who won because Buff Bagwell is mostly roids. And then got fired.
He no-showed a date or two, and Jim Ross has talked about how Jim Ross got a call from Judy Bagwell, Buff's mother, to say that Buff couldn't make it, and Jim Ross is like, I got nothing against Judy Bagwell. If she wants to send me a Christmas card, that's great. But I do not want your mother calling me and telling me when you won't be here. If you're not going to be here, you call me and tell me you're not going to be here.
That's way worse than them.
Then, he didn't. Bagwell impressed.
That's way worse than them sharing a bank account.
Yeah.
Right, it is
way worse.
That's a whole. Yeah. Of all the twisted ways you can insult somebody.
Then he became a gigolo.
Listen,
yes.
I'm a huge fan of CM Punk, but he doesn't know how families with any money work their money together, because he completely disowned his actual family.
I share a bank account with my mom just so I can keep track of her funds.
Yeah, and Colt Cabana has said, more recently, he's commented very little on this whole thing, but he did mention his brother, who is a successful Hollywood screenwriter for television, also shares a bank account with their mother, because that's how that works.
Anyway, well, we can talk about CM Punk and that whole situation forever. But we've got more stuff to talk about here. So next up, Lawrence Taylor versus Bam Bigelow from WrestleMania 11, the main event of WrestleMania 11. We got the $1 Million Corporation out there with Bam, Nikolai Volkov, the Supreme Fighting Machine, Tatanka, IRS, and of course Ted DiBiase. Lawrence Taylor's got his all-pro team of footballers. Ken Norton, Chris Spielman, Ricky Jackson, Carl Banks, Steve McMichael, who already gets a big pop when he comes out.
Steve McMichael, by the way.
And Reggie White.
Mongo, this whole time, by the way, looks like he is having the time of his life and is realizing what was he was meant to do on this planet.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. They do promos earlier in the show, and I searched around and found them. And they do a promo with all the football guys, most of them get half a line. Mongo starts real enthusiastic, immediately fumbles over his line a couple of times before he says it, and looks great doing it.
Make that man a horseman, right?
Right.
Oh my God.
We've talked about Mongo.
Apparently Ric Flair loved him.
Yeah. Yeah, Flair.
I don't think we've talked enough about Mongo, honestly.
Maybe not. Maybe we
have such an unpopular opinion about that version of the Horseman being one of the...
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
The Mongo Benoit version of the Horseman is probably my favorite.
Dude, we gotta do a Mongo episode.
He's
not going to be with us much longer, unfortunately.
Yeah.
Oh, no, yeah.
That's true. It's true. Unfortunately, as a suffering from ALS, advanced by now.
I mean, as we've said before,
good thoughts to manga.
Lifestyle-wise and personality-wise, he was as much a horseman as anyone.
Yeah.
In the ring was another story.
Mongo is so entertaining in so many ways. His promos are just the weirdest shit, and then you watch him in the ring, and it's like, wow, he's going to really hurt someone, and I want to watch and see if that happens.
So,
he started using the tombstone pile driver as his finish, man.
Oh, man.
Anyway, none of that is happening here at WrestleMania. They cut out Salt and Pepper doing What a Man for Lawrence Taylor, which was on the original broadcast. I wish I still had my original VHS of it.
No Spinderella
you can find
here.
It. And Salt and Pepper Spinderella, yes. And in fact, that was the music that LT came out to, but that was edited off the network also.
I see, yeah.
licensing issues. It was a
we
hit
do
song.
get Bam Bam Bigelow intimidating Salt and Pepper, which is fun.
Yes.
Yes, that's pretty good.
Pat Patterson is the referee here. There's some scuffling between the All-Proers and the $1 Million Corporation at the beginning. Chris Spielman falls on his ass trying to take out Tatanka. What do we all think about this match? I mean, I was a big fan of it at the time when I was 95. I was 10 years old, 9 years old.
Yeah.
I had the LT T-shirt that they're all wearing. I sent away for it. Growing up in New York, like I wasn't a huge sports fan, but you had to be a Lawrence Taylor fan, right? Like, I mean, I guess if you were my age, I don't know.
He was one of the most high-profile sports people in New York in the previous several years, and they market that towards kids pretty heavily.
How did you feel about this when it was happening, Eddie, as being a bit older than us?
Okay, so I was 19 at the time this was happening. The Super Bowl champion Giants teams in 86 and 90 were I cared about that stuff. Lawrence Taylor was just probably the most famous athlete in the city, and I did not watch the match live. I stopped WrestleMania before the main event. I had less than zero interest in this match.
Wow.
I would also. Oh, go ahead.
No, it was just such a I don't know. I think at that era, I just really had no interest in Bam Bam Bigelow and Ted DiBiase's Nikolai Volkov with the synth sign.
I loved all that shit.
I just couldn't. It just seemed like the most boring, just stick a celebrity in WrestleMania moment, and I didn't watch it the first time.
So, is this your first time watching it?
This was my first time watching it.
Oh wow!
Oh, this was fun.
What do you think about it now?
I always liked it. Well, what did you think now that you saw it?
I think Lawrence Taylor's forearm smashes looked amazing.
Yeah.
I think his forearm smashes look amazing. He's clearly just throwing them wherever, though.
Yes. I don't know if I'd want to take them.
Yeah, and I think it's to Bam Bam's credit, he's a 300+ pound man who's able to flip around, and he does that throughout the match, and and it was better than I thought it would be. Honestly, it was. I thought it was going to be sort of like one of those WCW Karl Malone matches or something like that.
Jay Leno.
But it was.
Bam Bam took this match very seriously. This was his WrestleMania main event. It was the biggest match that he ever got in WWF. Kind of sadly, because I was a big Bam Bam fan.
Oh, Bam Bam!
I wanted to see him.
Bam Bam is awesome.
Have the title even. But yeah, he just bumps for Lawrence Taylor. There's the one part at the beginning, Taylor slaps him and then hits him with a really nice clothesline, and then gives him kind of a knee strike and kind of throws him, and Bam Bam rolls, and then he clotheslines him out of the ring. And you see Bam Bam jumped a little bit early on it, but he was there's no way I'm gonna fail to get over the top rope here, right? I have to, that would kill it. If Bam Bam failed to get over there, it would have made Taylor look really bad, he couldn't do it. He couldn't knock him over the top. But Bam Bam does it, and, he sells great for Taylor. When he's in control, you can see him slowing Taylor down. Taylor keeps trying to fight back, a little bit too fast and a little bit too aggressively. There's one point where he just, shoves Bam Bam's ass because it was in his face, But, it doesn't really look good in a wrestling match. And just Bam Bam just kept control and kept, held down the pace the whole match. And I thought, maybe second to Hart and Bulldog, this might be the best carry job, big main event carry job ever in wrestling.
I mean, it's pretty amazing. It's pretty amazing considering that, Taylor being such a great athlete, seriously, probably the most athletic man in the NFL in his prime. And apart from those forearm smashes, he seems very unathletic in the ring. And and Bam Bam seems to be the accomplished athlete of the two. And the sell job is just it's all Bam Bam selling, right? Isn't it? It's and he's on offense, but he's just basically holding Taylor down. and sort of doing like a ground and pound offense. And
he does things that he'd never do in any other match. Like he puts him in a Boston Crab, a very gentle Boston Crab, because Taylor couldn't really bend that well, I don't think. I mean, he's clearly an amazing athlete. Like the way he vaults over the top rope to the floor is very impressive, Taylor. But when it comes to the kind of flexibility that you need to be a wrestler, especially at that point after years and years of playing football, and I don't think they were doing yoga at that point.
No.
There was only so much you could do with, there's almost so much he could actually wrestle.
And I think Bam Bam even had to because it looked so awkward, that Boston Crab, he had to transition it to what did he, grapevine to the leg or something like that? It was he
just started pulling the leg back. It looked okay. It didn't look like a major hold, but it got what they were trying to do. Also, it let LT rest. So he could catch his breath and then get to the ropes and
almost kill himself on the ropes.
By the end, Lawrence Taylor looked like he was in a lot of pain. And I don't mean he was selling really well. When they hold him up, he's crumpled over. Yeah.
But before that, Bam Bam basically back suplexes himself. LT kind of lifts him up, but pretty much Bam Bam jumps and bumps there. Bam Bam does his moonsault, which was always a little crooked and not a perfect moonsault, but he made damn sure he wasn't going to hurt LT. So he did more of a cartwheel off the top rope, which was cool in and of itself. And then Lawrence Taylor does the second worst jackknife powerbomb on that show.
Yeah, that was.
I love how it's somehow the second.
The second worst.
I need context.
Because the one that Diesel did to Shawn Michaels in the world title match was the worst.
Yeah, so you know how Katie, how in this one he barely gets Bam Bam up and over. Well, Diesel goes to jackknife Shawn Michaels, and Shawn just completely over rotates and basically lands on his feet and then falls backwards.
Oh no.
Yeah, so
the Diesel Shawn Michaels match on this show is another interesting kind of piece to pick apart, but that's different.
Yeah, the contrast between them, right? Two of the biggest wrestlers of the era having a very disappointing match, and then Bam Bam and a football player having his very first match, going well beyond expectations, But Taylor basically Bam Bam gets himself up high enough that he can bump while Taylor kind of falls over, and that was better than Diesel and Shawn Michaels.
Yeah, I mean, and that's pretty much the story of the match, really, right? Is Bam Bam does cartwheels for Lawrence Taylor, and then Taylor nearly kills himself going up to the second rope, and then hits him in another form smash, which we know he's good at, and
after he kicked out of the top rope headbutt.
Yeah,
but
devastating.
He hits that. Yeah, he had 4 or 5 forearm strikes, and then the one off the second finally won him the match.
And this, there's really no reason why this match should have been that good. I mean, besides Bam Bam, but I was so skeptical that I really didn't even watch it. I was just I can't, and Bam Bam did a great job. He really,
I guess it's
excellent.
It's become more
the story goes, somebody shouted at Bam Bam at an indie show in the early 2000s, "You lost to a football player." And Bam Bam shouted back, "I got paid $500,000 to lose to a football player. I'd do it again." Yeah, buddy. I'm with you.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it's a lot more commonplace now to put celebrities in the ring who haven't trained that much. Though the recent ones they've done this was kind of one of the better, or if not the best, celebrity performances. Right. But now after, Bad Bunny and freaking Logan Paul and what's his face?
Johnny Knoxville?
Yeah, Johnny Knoxville did pretty well. I was thinking, what's his face? The guy who was commentating for them as well, the football player.
Oh, Pat McAfee.
The punter. McAfee, yeah. He did really well too.
They have the performance center now. They did a couple of training sessions with Lawrence Taylor, and that was it. And they were concerned that he hadn't trained enough to do it. And that was one of the reasons why Pat Patterson was in there as the ref, and they made it clear to LT, if you're embarrassing all of us out there, we're just going to have Bam Bam pin you, and that'll be that.
Mm.
And the ref would go along with it because he's Pat Patterson. Of course, he'll go along with it. But LT held his own, and it went off well. Yeah, but my initial point, though, is now they have the Performance Center where, like, Logan Paul is an interesting case that recently there was some media with Shawn Michaels, who's training people at the Performance Center, who's training Logan Paul. And he said, we have to train him sort of in reverse, because the first thing that's happening is he's having these big, long, elaborate matches. So we have to train him specifically how to do those matches and then show him the basics afterwards. And Logan Paul has been taking to it very well. You know, there's no denying that. If you see his work, it's excellent for I'd say it's excellent for his experience level. It's just really good. So
yeah, I mean, in there with Roman Reigns talking him through the big match, if you put him in there with, like, even just a competent wrestler, you know, but on a regular TV match, and that happened with Ronda Rousey too, right? Like Ronda Rousey, when she was having these big main events with women who were very experienced and very good at having great main events, she was awesome. Then when it came to the, like, week-to-week grind of being the champion when she came, I mean, there was a lot of reasons why she wasn't as good when she came back. But her flaws were very much exposed when she was just doing normal matches instead of the, like, very rehearsed main events.
Yeah.
I think like Logan Paul looks so good on just like a leapfrog. Like who does a better leapfrog than Logan Paul right now? You know, he's wildly good, shockingly good. I would say, and McAfee almost is too. It's they've come a long way with this because it was just like
they have.
You know, it was brutal with Mr. T was
right. I guess that's what you were thinking when LT was going like, oh, this is going to be like that. Yeah.
Like, oh, I don't want to see this. He's going to embarrass himself and wrestling, you know, and win, you know.
I mean, Mr. T, I think, did fine for himself at WrestleMania 1. WrestleMania 2,
was the problem.
Yeah,
one beating the tag match. He's he's not doing all that, you know.
Right. All right, we have one more match to talk about.
One more match,
and
it's a short one.
Eddie, you brought this one up, and this is a whole other kind of animal. This is less like let's try to carry the guy to a good match, and more like how do we get out of here without anyone getting horribly hurt, and just like this match should never have. It might be the worst match in history just because it really should have never made it to the ring. Right?
The word match is generous.
Yeah, it's Sting versus Jeff Hardy for the TNA World Championship from Victory Road 2011. And, you know, I think we already knew, right? Like they were already saying on the internet that Jeff Hardy had shown up to the building like totally messed up, like very intoxicated.
Yeah, he was done. No, I don't think he arrived. I think the story wasn't that he arrived at the building. I think the story is that he arrived at the building fine, and then at some point over the course of the night, he changed.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
It was very last minute that they had to deal with him.
Damn.
And he's completely in no condition to perform.
That makes sense that something changed because it comes off as very last minute. Had he arrived to the building that messed up, this would not have happened.
Okay, maybe he didn't, but I do remember them reporting online, like Jeff Hardy, they're not sure if they're going to have the match.
Yes.
We're not sure what's going to happen. I mean, he comes out to his own song. He doesn't look good. Sting has the Hardy signature belt as the title.
Sting is stone-faced the whole time.
Yeah.
Hardy completely stumbles out. Hardy looks so sad watching him try and get to the ring.
The whole story is that Hardy should be prepared for Sting this time, like he wasn't before. And then Eric Bischoff comes out, and you can see him like say some stuff to Jeff off the mic, and then do his announcement bullshit of it's going to be a no DQ, and then he says some stuff to Sting, and then he announces some more stuff. It's like, oh, what was he telling them?
credit to Eric Bischoff here for being the only person who could do that kind of thing right then. Is killing time on the mic to get the word around of what was about to happen to everybody on live pay-per-view in front of the cameras, having to make all of these like final decisions and calls,
When he says the thing to Jeff Hardy, you see Jeff Hardy like blow into his hand. Like he's like, my breath is fine.
Yeah.
Like
I mean, Bischoff is really the Bret Hart of this situation.
right. He's the one. He's the one who carries this match.
He really carried this mess of a situation where things could have gone horribly wrong, and sort of the only outcome that would be non-dangerous to everyone involved is what happened, right? It's a Scorpion Death Drop done.
That's it. Yeah. Well, first you have Hardy like doing the T-shirt gimmick, like, oh, I'm gonna throw the T-shirt, and Sting's like, let's just wrestle. Let's just like, no, I'm gonna throw this T-shirt. Sting backs him into the corner. He's like, chill. All right, I'm not gonna throw the T-shirt.
Yeah, they go back and forth for about 20 seconds. Sting hits him a couple times. Jeff's selling or whatever, and then Sting grabs him like really tight, hooks and drops him on the back of his head with that Scorpion Death Drop. Immediately covers him, hooks the leg, holds him down as hard as he can, and Jeff's kicking. Jeff's trying to kick out.
Yeah.
The ref isn't like going for a legitimate shoulders job or anything. He counts to 3, and Sting gets up, and they hand him his belt. And Jeff looks like, what's going on? He looks at the ref, This ain't the Orlando screw job, buddy. You showed up to the ring in no condition to perform, and Sting, the veteran Sting, had to take care of business the old-fashioned way.
It's not the screw job. You know what you did, or at least at some point in the near future, you will know what you did when you regain coherency.
Yeah, maybe when you watch the video tomorrow, you'll realize what happened.
Maybe. I mean, it's so sad with Jeff because it just seems like he can't get it together. They finally he was, something was going wrong in WWE, and he found a way to get out of there and be with his brother in AEW. But, it was clearly, he was still having problems, and they, I don't know.
Well, everybody wants Jeff Hardy to get better and be the best Jeff Hardy he can be, but nobody can make him do anything.
It might be a situation like it was with Scott Hall where he just can't be on the road. He's fine when he's at home.
Yeah.
And then
it's possible.
And he's not going to stop taking those crazy bumps. And if he's in pain, he's
got to get to that DDP house and then something like that.
Maybe. Yeah. Yeah. Who's going to carry Jeff Hardy to life?
Yeah. I don't think he wants the structure of the DDP house. I think he needs to do his own thing. Jeff Hardy is such a crazy artist guy. But yeah, this match is one of the classic, bad TNA moments that gets, looked at over and over again. It's like, should they have even gone to the ring? I don't know. It all ended up fine.
So. I don't think, they should have let him go out there. And that's, I think, part of the problem is these wrestling companies keep wanting to use Jeff Hardy because he draws money and, he's always going to be popular. And
right. He's legitimately one of the most popular wrestlers of the last 20 years.
Yeah.
And he can be amazing, is often amazing. But, the alternative is, it's a coin toss though with what you're going to get out of him.
Yeah. For sure. All right. Well, any last thoughts on any of these matches? The general idea of it's an incredible thing in wrestling, right? Because it's such a competitive industry, and yet you have to depend on the person you're in the ring with in order to produce something that's good. And so often, wrestlers who, maybe are in a lower spot or making less money than others, have to get in the ring and make the other guy, who's not as good look good, for their mutual benefit, even if that benefit is going to fall much more in the favor of the person being carried. And, in some ways it's really not it's unlike any other industry in that respect. Though I don't know. I guess that happens in movies sometimes. There's the big money star who can't act their way out of a cardboard box.
But they're the ones that look good on the poster.
Yeah, but the difference in wrestling is like it's at the possible peril of like physical peril of your life. Like you have to let this guy who isn't as well trained as you pick you up and slam you, and hope that you don't get horribly injured.
I hope you know how to post, buddy.
Right. Well, I don't know. I don't really know what to say. You kind of summed it up there. It's hard, but that is the job sometimes, is that you got to get in there with somebody that doesn't know what they're doing and either make them look like they know what they're doing, or at the very least not get really hurt or hurt them.
Yeah, and I think that's kind of amazing that Bam Bam was able to pull that off with Lawrence Taylor being as inexperienced as he was and getting a decent match out of him. But I guess Bam Bam, he's a legitimate tough guy. So it's not, if Taylor did get wild with him, it could, he could definitely settle that down.
Yeah.
So before we wrap up completely, Eddie, do you want to tell us about your book? Tell us about your stuff.
Sure. Yeah, I have a book coming out called Graveyard Stompers. It's coming out in the early part of 2023, and it's about sort of a crew from the New York hardcore scene who, and one of them's a bare knuckle boxer, and like it's this, it's very much sort of like I guess like the Wanderers and Snatch, if you combine those two things, and it's it's kind of like punk rock noir, and and it's that kind of deal, crime fiction, very Brooklyn, very 90s.
That sounds
punk
awesome.
rock noir from the 90s. That's really something. If I hear all that put together.
Do we know when it's coming out?
Early 2023, but I'm not sure exactly when.
All right, well, we'll keep looking out for that for sure. We can follow you where?
Yes, on Instagram, it's Toss Your Own Salad, one word. And that means
which is also the name of your book.
Yeah, it's my cookbook. It's about that just means like anyone can make a salad. There's no other connotations.
Of course.
He made that phrase up himself, everybody.
Yeah.
Yes. It's instructive.
Awesome.
It's like the joy of painting. Anybody can paint.
Right.
Yeah, anyone can do it.
Anyone can do it.
Oh man.
You just throw all of your food in a bowl, and it's a salad. I do like making a good salad.
And tossing a good salad.
There you go.
Depending.
We would also like to plug our Patreon, patreon.com/contestingwrestling. $5 a month gets you access to our full library of now over 100 premium episodes, with new ones being added all the time. So please check that out and support the podcast so we can keep doing it. Thank you so much, Eddie, for coming on.
Thanks,
this
Eddie.
was
Thank you. This was great. This is really a great time, and I got to watch those matches. It was great talking to you guys. Awesome.
Awesome. If you ever have another idea for an episode or anything like that, we would be overjoyed to have you back.
Well, if I don't suck on this episode, I'll spam you with ideas.
We'll let you know.
Okay. Let me know. Yeah, let me know.
Sounded good to me, but chime in.
It's always fun to dig into the vast library of professional wrestling and analyze things with a new eye, which is what we like to do here on Contesting Wrestling.
Yeah, I'd love to cover some of that other like early 80s stuff that you might remember as standing out pretty well. We already did a Backlund episode, but there's more Backlund matches we didn't cover, and if you can think of a theme from around that time, I would be very down for that.
The people, like the fans who believed it was real at MSG. That's like,
all right.
That's fascinating. All right, so I will think of something. And thanks for having me. It was really, really fun.
All right, great. Well done for everybody here, for Handgun Katie Vela, for Professor Ben Abelson, for Eddie McNamara. I am, as usual, Doc Diamondfire. This has been Contesting Wrestling. Thank you all. We love you.
Bye. Peace.